Hashtag how hackers actually hack, real techniques explained every single day. Approximately 2,200 cyber attacks happen worldwide. That breaks down to roughly one attack every 39 seconds. And yet most people still imagine hackers as hoodie-wearing geniuses furiously typing green code into a black terminal screen. The reality is far more methodical, far more patient, and honestly, far more terrifying. Today, we are pulling back the curtain completely and showing you exactly how real hackers operate, what tools they actually use, and the specific techniques that have compromised some of the biggest organizations on the planet. This is not speculation. This is real tradecraft, explained so you can finally understand what you are actually up against. Before we dive into the techniques themselves, we need to understand the mindset. Professional hackers, whether criminal or state-sponsored, do not randomly attack systems hoping something works. They operate in a structured framework called the cyber kill chain, originally developed by Lockheed Martin. This model breaks an attack into 7 distinct phases: reconnaissance, weaponization, delivery, exploitation, installation, command and control, and finally, actions on objectives. Every serious attack follows this pattern, whether the target is a hospital, a bank, or your personal email account. Understanding this framework is the foundation for understanding everything else we are about to explain. The first phase, reconnaissance, is where attackers spend the most time, and it is almost entirely passive. Hackers gather intelligence before touching a single system. They use open-source intelligence tools, commonly called OSINT, to map out their target. This includes scraping LinkedIn to identify employees, their job titles, and their likely access levels. They examine company websites for email formats. They search GitHub repositories where developers sometimes accidentally commit API keys, passwords, and internal configuration files. Tools like Shodan, which is essentially a search engine for internet-connected devices, allow attackers to identify exposed servers, outdated software versions, and misconfigured systems, all without ever sending a single malicious packet to the target organization. A hacker can learn an enormous amount about your infrastructure before you have any idea you are being studied. Once reconnaissance is complete, attackers move into weaponization. This is where they build or acquire the specific tool they plan to use. Contrary to popular belief, most hackers are not writing sophisticated malware from scratch. Dark web marketplaces sell ready-made exploit kits, ransomware as a service packages, and stolen credentials by the millions. In 2023, researchers discovered over 24 billion compromised username and password combinations circulating in criminal forums. Attackers simply purchase access. They might buy a valid credential set for your company's VPN for as little as $10, then use it to walk straight through the front door. Now we arrive at delivery, and this is where most attacks actually make initial contact. Phishing remains the single most common delivery mechanism, responsible for over 90% of all successful data breaches according to Verizon's annual Data Breach Investigations report. But modern phishing is nothing like the poorly written Nigerian prince emails of the early 2000s. Today's spear phishing attacks are surgically precise. An attacker will study a target employee's LinkedIn activity, learn they attended a recent industry conference, then send an email impersonating the conference organizers with a link to download the speaker presentations. The email will pass spam filters because it comes from a freshly registered lookalike domain. The link will load a convincing replica of a legitimate website. And one click later, the attack has its foothold. Beyond phishing, attackers leverage drive-by downloads, watering hole attacks, and supply chain compromises. The SolarWinds attack of 2020 is the defining example of a supply chain compromise. Hackers, later attributed to Russian state intelligence, infiltrated the SolarWinds software build process and inserted malicious code directly into a legitimate software update. When approximately 18,000 organizations downloaded what they believed was a routine security patch, they unknowingly installed a backdoor. Victims included the U.S. Treasury, the Department of Homeland Security, and dozens of Fortune 500 companies. Nobody clicked a suspicious link. Nobody ignored a security warning. They simply updated their software. Exploitation is the phase where attackers leverage a specific vulnerability to execute their code or escalate their access. Vulnerabilities are categorized by their severity using the CVSS scoring system, which rates flaws on a scale from 0 to 10. A score above 9 is considered critical. In 2023 alone, over 28,000 new vulnerabilities were publicly disclosed, averaging more than 500 new flaws every single week. Attackers pay close attention to the window between when a vulnerability is publicly announced and when organizations actually patch it. Research shows the average organization takes 60 to 150 days to apply critical security patches. Attackers frequently weaponize newly disclosed vulnerabilities within 15 days of public announcement. That gap is where breaches happen. Zero-day vulnerabilities are even more dangerous. These are flaws that the software vendor does not yet know about, meaning no patch exists. Nation-state hacking groups stockpile zero days as strategic assets. A single working zero-day exploit for a popular enterprise product can sell for over $1 million on gray market brokers. When these weapons are deployed, defenders have no warning and no immediate remedy. After exploitation comes installation, where attackers establish persistence. They need to ensure they maintain access even if the compromised machine is rebooted or the initial vulnerability gets patched. Common persistence mechanisms include creating new user accounts with administrative privileges, installing web shells on compromised web servers, modifying registry keys on Windows systems to run malicious software at startup, and planting scheduled tasks that periodically check back with attacker-controlled infrastructure. This phase is often where attackers also conduct lateral movement, pivoting from the initially compromised machine to other systems inside the network. They use legitimate tools like Windows Management Instrumentation, PowerShell, and Remote Desktop Protocol to move through the environment, often blending in with normal administrator activity. The command and control phase establishes a communication channel between the attacker and their implanted malware. Modern attackers are extraordinarily careful here. They route their communications through multiple layers of anonymization, use encrypted channels that blend into normal HTTPS web traffic, and frequently leverage legitimate cloud services like Google Drive, Dropbox, and even Twitter as covert communication channels. This technique, called living off trusted infrastructure, makes detection extremely difficult because security tools are not designed to block traffic to well-known, trusted platforms. The final phase, actions on objectives, is where attackers finally do what they came to do. And this varies enormously depending on the attacker's motivation. Criminal groups typically deploy ransomware, encrypting organizational data and demanding payment, often in cryptocurrency, for the decryption key. The average ransomware payment in 2023 exceeded $1 million. State-sponsored groups focus on long-term espionage, silently exfiltrating sensitive documents, intellectual property, and communications over months or years before anyone notices. Hacktivists deface websites or leak sensitive data to cause reputational damage. And insider threats, which security teams frequently underestimate, involve employees or contractors who already have legitimate access and abuse it for financial gain or revenge. Understanding these techniques raises the obvious question: how do defenders fight back? The answer lies in detection and response speed. Modern cybersecurity operations centers deploy security information and event management systems, called CIEM platforms, that aggregate logs from across the entire organization and apply behavioral analytics to identify anomalous patterns. When an employee account suddenly authenticates from 2 different countries within 30 minutes, that is flagged. When a server begins communicating with a previously unseen external IP address at 3 a.m, that triggers an alert. The goal is reducing what the industry calls dwell time, which is the length of time an attacker operates inside a network before being detected. The global average dwell time currently sits at approximately 21 days. Best-in-class organizations have reduced this to under 24 hours. Multi-factor authentication remains one of the single most effective defensive controls available. Microsoft's own research indicates that MFA blocks approximately 99.9% of automated credential-based attacks. It will not stop a sophisticated targeted attacker indefinitely, but it dramatically raises the cost and complexity of an attack, causing many opportunistic attackers to simply move on to easier targets. Patch management, network segmentation, the principle of least privilege, and regular employee security awareness training round out the foundational defensive posture that every organization, regardless of size, should maintain. The uncomfortable truth that the security industry sometimes avoids saying out loud is that determined, well-resourced attackers will eventually find a way in.